So, hi, everybody. I'm really excited today to have a special guest, actually, my first guest ever, and it's Tyler Destefano with Doctors Disability Specialists. Tyler and I have known each other for 4, 5, 6 years now and have worked closely in a lot of different facets of dentistry. We have a lot of mutual clients, and it's really exciting to have an expert to be able to chat with regarding dentistry and doctors that are selling and doctors that are buying.
Well, thanks for having me, Ed. I appreciate it.
And I was thinking that we've met probably 5 years ago.
Younger people it sort of slowly happens over time, and if you actually stop and think about it, it's hard to remember, which I think is special.
Agreed.
I don't know if it was Yankee or this or that, but it happened. That's all I know.
it started to really understand the value of influencers, and trusted advisors when I got into this role, more so than in my last one. And then I think that's about when we met, right?
Yeah.
Yankee, I would think.
It's one of those things where it's like when you have your friend from 10, 15, 20 years ago, you kind of forget how you met. You just know your friends now. And I feel like that's what happened with you. And
it's funny how sometimes, and I think we have a lot of people in our network that we've come kind of gravitate towards, whether it's a trust factor or like factor, probably all the above, collaborate and for a common cause, our clients. Into me and DDSMatch, and you with Doctors Disability Specialists, which is both DDS, which is very interesting marketing, how our relationship has evolved and how our processes are kind of merging together to help doctors that are coming into dentistry or going out of dentistry. And sometimes people in the middle as well. So I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about our process, right? I think that you've gained such a reputation throughout the country, you and your entire team, because you surely how much you care and what you do for your clients, but you also have a process, I would assume, that you kind of pursue, to accomplish what you do at a very high level.
Yeah, I think what helped us grow our practice from the very beginning is, when I decided to specialize in dentistry, we got sort of a unique advantage, not right away, but over time, because in my business, when you're working with all sorts of different people, you're always being dealt a different hand. The fact patterns are always different. The opportunities, the threats are different with clients. When you specialize, though, it's like you're getting dealt the same hand every time. And as a result, I have an advantage with my clients that I can anticipate all these things before they know about it. And it would become crazy if you didn't get good at it, because we do it literally 10, 12 times a day, all day long for 14 years now. So I think that's the advantage that our clients have working with us, is not just access to our relationships and our people and our pipeline of connections, but also we've done this thousands of times.
Interesting, right? I guess that defines a trusted advisor, someone who has been through this multiple times and knows what's around the corner. When you're going through it the first time, you don't know what's around every corner.
I know.
Kind of reminds me when I watch mountain bike videos. I'm like, oh, I could do that. Yeah, not so much. Tell me, how long have you been doing this?
So started in 2007 as just a regular financial planning insurance practice. I remember back then I would take a meeting with anybody that would talk to me. And I think when I got into this business, I thought it was gonna be like the movies where people are yelling, you have 4 computer monitors, the phones are ringing, like the Wall Street movies. I think that's what I thought back then that I was getting into. And the reality was my phone wasn't ringing. I had 0 clients. And like I said, I'd take a meeting with anybody. And then in 2008, by chance, just started working with a couple of students from Tufts and then some faculty, ended up at a couple of dental meetings and just kind of liked it and fell in love with dentistry and decided to commit to it and specialize and rebrand our company around it. And that's when Doctors Disability Specialists was born. And really from that point forward, every client we have is a dentist. That's all we do.
It's interesting that very few people that come into dentistry ever leave. We're truly in a great industry. And I think a lot of it, it's not just what our dentists do and how they help people, their patients, and make them feel better and look better and all that, but there's a camaraderie about it. There's just something special about dentistry that once you're either in the family, almost like being in the mob.
What I like about it, I think that, and you'll see this, like the really superstar dentists, I think, are the ones that realize and appreciate the idea that their business is a relationship type business, whether it's doctor to patient or doctor to advisor, the relationship matters. And I think the ones that lose sight of that and treat these patients like patients and not people, those are the ones that can struggle. And then from our point of view as advisors, it's an amazing opportunity because it is a relationship and the relationship matters. And, I think clients, your clients, my clients can be the beneficiary of those relationships. If they need something done, like we probably know who to call and we can make that meaningful connection.
I was thinking just the other day about what I do, and it's rather vague sometimes because, finding a candidate, say for a seller, is not sometimes a challenge, but often that's the easy part. And managing the relationship and the emotions, all of the tension that comes along with that is someone is letting go of the baton or something they've built all their life, and someone coming in who's scared to death to come into something. Helping those folks try to figure it out is, very critical. And then what we're doing is transitioning a relationship from one person to another. So the seller doc has gained all this trust, and now we have to figure out how to hand it off to this new doctor. So in that word relationship, which is so often overused, it's a crux of being human, isn't it? It's what pulls us together.
I think there's so many things that need to go right in a transition. Like if you were to build a list, I imagine there's 20, 30 different things that need to go right. And one of those things that goes wrong could sabotage the whole deal. Maybe even more the buyers, they just think, oh, I'll just do this myself. Well, it's going to be hard.
It's difficult to practice on yourself.
Well, the good news with something like that is the stakes aren't that high. If you mess it up, you lost a day and a few $1,000s and you do it over and you can overcome it. But once you hit on that path, it's hard to undo if it's messed up. And then all of a sudden you have 30 years of effort and maybe $1 million or $500,000 of value that is somehow compromised. And the stakes, there are no redos, whether it's disability insurance and you're disabled and you didn't get it done right, or you try selling your practice yourself and it doesn't go the right way.
What do you think are some of the things that you see from some of the young doctors coming in that a commonality of what they don't realize before they talk to you guys?
Anybody that's listening to this is probably going to object with what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyways, and it's risky. But I think the biggest problem that young buyers have is they're obsessed with price. And everything else in life, whether you're buying a car or a house, you negotiate things, right? And you never have to deal with the seller again of a house. So you negotiate every last $1,000. When you're buying a practice, whether the practice is 700,000 or 650 or 625, in most scenarios, it doesn't matter. If it's a good deal at 625, it's probably a good deal at 700 too. Now, obviously, the better deal they can get, the better. But I've seen people walk away over $50,000, $100,000, which translates into $400 or $500 a month in debt service, and they just ruin their opportunity. When you're buying a practice, the price obviously matters, but what matters more is that goodwill being transferred. I'm a very seller favorable person because I recognize and I appreciate the fact that they've spent 20, 30 years building this. And whoever's coming in is coming in on year 31 and skipping all the labor pains of what that person went through, and they're sort of getting a fast pass, and I respect that. So I think that's the big thing is everybody's so worried about the price. Yes, it matters, but there's 19 way more important questions to worry about.
I'd like to amplify on that a little bit. A lot of buyers and sometimes sellers look at it like buying a house, which is an investment of sorts, but it's kind of a commodity. Buying a practice is more like buying a stock. You don't buy the cheapest stock on the stock market. You buy the stock that's going to pay off the most, right? Regardless of what that number is. And that's really what I find very similar that folks don't understand coming into this is that you're buying cash flow. You're buying, again, that relationship, and that relationship brings in money on a consistent basis. And the practice that has a solid relationship cash flow is very worthwhile. And to try to bicker over those little things, you lose your investment.
Sometimes people don't even get to the bicker part. That's a foreshadow. I see it happening. But a lot of people disqualify themselves as buying an opportunity because the idea of borrowing $1 million makes them sick to their stomach. They have 400,000 of student loans and they have the house loan. I'm like, I can't afford to have more debt. I would argue that many of them can't afford not to have it because what they're failing to calculate is they're making 200,000 potentially as an associate. When they buy this practice, yes, they're going to have $100,000 of loan payments per year, but they're going to make 400,000 in cash flow. So really, after the debt service is really what they need to consider. And if you're making 400,000 minus 100,000 of debt service, you're still ahead of where you were. So I always tell my people, like, if you're waiting for that weird, uncomfortable, like nervousness feeling in your stomach to go away, where all of a sudden you feel ready, you're going to be waiting forever. It's never going to happen. There's going to be a new kitchen or a family or a baby or moving. There's always going to be a reason. So I say when you're clinically ready, that's a good time to start looking. And look at a lot of practices you're not even interested in. You have no intention, but it will get you comfortable with practicing how to get through these things quickly. Because when you do find the right one, you're gonna have to make a very quick decision that you've never made before. And if you don't, everybody's gonna run right past you. You made an offer and they got it, not you.
So it's important to be ready once you start seriously looking, to have your ducks in a row, have your team together, your attorney, potentially CPA, yourself, just so, locked and loaded, if you will. Dentistry, healthcare, but mostly dentistry and maybe a couple other specifics, are one of the few specialties in medicine, or potentially in anything, where a bank is essentially lending money with no collateral, which is, what is a practice, right? You can't come take it away. The banks understand that a good dentist that can do the procedures will take those patients. The patients will continue to come back, and that new dentist will then grow within the structure that the selling dentist. I always did find that fascinating, that $1 million you just spoke of, you signed for. I mean, your house isn't on the line. The only thing that's on the line is your credit and the practice itself. Debt to the banks is very different. So they have good debt and bad debt, right? Good debt is student loans. You've invested in yourself. You have skin in the game. You're serious about this. But it's interesting how the experts, again, pointing to the banks, really understand how much to put into your career. And there's not many other places that you can find that type of situation in lending and everything else.
Dentistry is recession proof. Have you heard that before?
I have.
You have, and I've never really lived through it. And although the pandemic technically wasn't a recession, for many business owners, it certainly felt like one. And there's many that still haven't recovered, and probably many more that never will. But when you look at dentistry, look what's happening. They're busier than ever. They bounced right back. It was no question a difficult year. It's coming back. And I think that this demonstrates the idea that, banks have to lend to somebody. That's how they make money. They borrow money from you and I in our checking account at almost 0%, and they have to lend that to somebody to make money. And rather than lending to yogurt shops or restaurants or clothing stores that go out of business every time, or not every time, often, dentistry doesn't. The only way our dentist really goes out of business on a big scale is if they're disabled. And that's why they make you buy disability to cover your loan. It's just a good idea anyways. And that's where we come in. It should give confidence that if these banks are willing to give you 100% financing, they probably have more confidence in you than you do in yourself.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right.
Sellers, what are mistakes they make? What are the things that they, not that they make, but sometimes by doing nothing, it's worse than doing the wrong thing. Maybe they don't want to retire yet, but things they could do to get ready.
When you start to think about selling your practice, a quote that I just recently saw: when a man doesn't know which harbor he's heading towards, the wind is never right. So you're just adrift. And because the practice, it becomes a bit routine. And the next thing you know, then you get to a point of urgency. Something's happened. You're burned out, your back goes out, whatever, right? Life happens. And I truly believe that it's critical that you start thinking about what your exit strategy is going to look like. Whether it's your own timeline, hey, I want to do it in 10 years or 5 years, or something happens that causes it to be a little bit sooner. I spend a lot of time with potential clients before they become my clients talking about, do you have everything in order? Do you have a plan that if something were to happen to you, that a family member can just take that and know who to contact and know what to do? To have a plan in place, because I've seen way too many times where, something terrible happens and the family is now scrambling to get a second opinion. Is your money in the right place? Is it doing the right things? You probably maybe started with a financial planner when, you were in your 30s and now you're in your 60s and 70s. Are you on the right track? Depending on how long you have, are you doing the right things to maximize what the practice is doing within whatever your appetite is to do that? Many states where it might be a good time to negotiate with some of the insurance companies. You should check and make sure you're feeling good about each one of those. Insurance absolutely being one of them.
And the challenge, I think, is as the doctors get older, they can't afford necessarily to retire and be done. And they assume that the idea of selling their practice is synonymous with retiring. And therefore, they don't have these conversations, where it doesn't have to be true. In fact, I would argue that if the dentist is willing to sell their practice but stay on for a year or two as an associate or longer, that actually might make their practice worth more. Hang on too long, the value goes down and down. And if they were to cash out 2 years, maybe earlier than they wanted to or expected to, and now invest that lump sum of money, the odds are that that will probably grow at a faster pace in the valuation of their office.
For the people listening, the practice has to be able to support that type of an environment. So if it's an individual buying and the selling doctor wants to stay on, if the practice can support both doctors, that works great. Or often there may be someone in your area that wants a second practice and, would have you stay on, maybe work a little less, bring in some specialty. I think the opportunities are numerous if you start talking about it, right? And what's right for you. So giving you all the options, breaking it down, and helping dentists understand 3 choices. Which one do I like, right? And sometimes we go after 2 at a time because we don't know which one is going to actually, come to fruition.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say hypothetically, you have a really great office that has $1.5 million in revenue, one doctor owner, one associate that's been there a long time, for whatever reason doesn't want to buy, but that associate has no employment contract. How does that feel to a potential buyer compared to saying, all right, I'm organized. Yep, my guy has a contract. Whether it's enforceable or not is a whole nother story.
That's a killer. Number one, the banks will kill it because they know that that associate can go across the street and open up their own practice and take, half the patients or whatever with them. And part of that 5-year, 10-year conversation is to make sure that you have that non-compete in place because it's pretty critical. Enforceable or not, it does put at the minimum a drag on someone just leaving and taking it with you.
And almost like the non-solicitation part's almost more valuable because the non-compete's one thing, but there's more patients than people know what to do with it. It's the team, it's the staff that's the trouble right now.
Yeah. The other thing I'm finding is for young docs is that $1.5 million point is kind of maybe 2 million is kind of the break mark. And what I'm saying is if you have a single practitioner, high producing super doc doing 1.5 million, it's difficult to find someone to come in and step in those shoes and just take over because typically the person coming in has not had that experience. The selling doctor got to 1.5 million over time and, honed their clinical skills and their communication skills and their team and all that. Now, the new doc has to depend so much more on that team. Often what I like to do is look at what the selling doctors maybe not doing because a lot of young doctors are now doing more complex procedures, which a lot of the retiring doctors don't. They're sticking to the bread and butter and doing very well at it. So often it's important that the young doctor can come in and maybe add, maybe molar endo or some implant placement or things of that nature to be that, really hit the ground running as far on a monetary level, but then start growing it from there as well. So if you're coming in at 1.5, you want to be at 2 million in the next couple of years, right? And how to do that. And typically when a practice is sold, it takes a little bit of a dip, right? You see, 5 to 10% the first year, and then starts to really, accelerate. So it's good for a buyer to understand that, so they have a sense of confidence when they're coming into the practice, and it's going to be viable and profitable for them.
And that tail growth is so important to go from 1.5, even just to 1.7. That extra 200,000 in collections is probably almost 80% profit, because when you do that, your fixed overhead won't change. Your staff costs will likely stay the same. Your rent, your utilities, heat, everything will likely stay the same. What will change is the variables in the labs and consumables. But that incremental growth is, I think, something that can just really make that person grow, not just financially, but professionally.
In the end, dentists provide a service that's very expensive. Often I can't see it, and often I can't feel it. And so now I'm trusting you. I've seen so many dentists say, okay, everything on this side of the line is necessary. Everything on this side of the line is elective. And then the first thing that happens, that line starts to move around. I respect what our clients do. It's not easy.
It is.